Good evening, and welcome to the May 26, 2026 Board of Adjustment meeting. Tonight, every night, applicants will be given 15 minutes to present their application. If more time is needed, please request more time at the beginning of the presentation. Public comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. There has been a request to postpone prior to 24 hours before the meeting, so I'm going to ask for a motion to suspend the rules to take item 1C out of order.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so the request to postpone is new business C, the request of Ryan Trust owner for property located at 221 Woodbury Avenue, whereas relief is needed to subdivide the existing parcel into 2 parcels for demolition of the existing 1-story detached garage and construction of a new 2-story detached garage on Lot 1, and a new single-family residential structure on Lot 2, which requires the following. 1, a variance from Section 10.521 to allow 63 feet of frontage where 100 feet is required. And 2, that's it. Said property is located on Assessor Map 175, Lot 10, and lies within the General Residence A District. And the reason for the request to postpone is that the applicant has asked for time to provide additional information and clarification of his application. So I would like a motion to postpone.
I would move
this.
that the board grant the request to postpone.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? No. Okay. So this application is postponed to the June meeting. Okay, just finishing note taking here. Okay. The next item of business is 1, new business. A, the request of Eldridge Place Condo Association owner for property located at 40 Merrimack Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing rear deck and construct a new deck, which requires the following. 1, a variance from Section 10.521 to allow a 3.5-foot side yard where 10 feet are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 129, Lot 18, and lies within the General Residence A District. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Peter Carpenter, 40 Merrimack Street, Unit 1, Eldridge Place Condo Association. I'm going to start off by just reading a little bit of history on the property. I'd like to begin by providing just a brief history on the property with a few milestones. Structure currently occupying the space at 40 Merrimack Street was built in the 1870s, served as a carriage house for 10 Merrimack Street, collectively known as the Eldridge Estate. 2-building estate was originally owned by H. Fisher Eldridge and family, founders of the then prominent Eldridge Brewing Company. Longtime Portsmouth residents will remember the carriage house at 40 Merrimack Street serving as the local YWCA building back in the 60s and 70s. In 1987, the vacant building began its conversion to 3 conjoined townhouse-style condominiums initiated by Richard E. Sullivan, Sullivan Builders. Included in this conversion was the construction of a 48-foot by 8-foot attached deck, with the 48-foot dimension spanning the full length of the structure's rear. The 8-foot dimension extending from the rear of the structure into the backyard, with the full deck elevated approximately 6 feet off the ground. Presently, the 3 townhouse owners of 40 Merrimack Street, Eldridge Place Condo Association, self-managed, wish to remove the existing pressure-treated lumber deck due to deteriorating physical conditions, replace it with a new composite deck. For the rebuild, our hope is to add an additional 2 feet of depth, making the finished deck 48 feet by 10 feet. A variance is required for the additional 2 feet of depth and existing non-conforming side setback. City of Portsmouth zoning ordinance section 10.520/table 10.521 GRA standard. Current side setback 10 feet, existing setback 6 feet, proposed setback 4 feet. And I've got an asterisk for 3.5. It's 3.5 to 4 feet. I did a couple of measurements. I did some math based on lot lines, and it was between 3.5 and 4. So with that said, I can get right to the 5 variance criteria if that's.
Yes, unless there's questions for the applicant on the overall project. Okay, yes,
Okay.
please do.
So as per our rules here in the city of Portsmouth, Part 10.233.20 In order to authorize variance, the board must find that the variance meets all the following criteria. Point 2.1, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The 2-foot depth extension request on our existing deck will not present any negative impact by changing the essential character of the neighborhood, and likewise will not result in harmful conditions to neighborhood residents, guests, and the general public at large. Specifically, the proposed extension to the existing deck footprint will not create noise or foot traffic, will not inhibit existing sightlines for neighbors, and will keep with the neighborhood's current aesthetics. Point 2.2, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. Adding an additional 96 square feet to our building footprint would result in a negligible increase to 12.6% lot coverage, where 25% is code for GRA zone. Although our proposed side setback will sit approximately 3.5 to 4 feet, where 10 feet is required according to GRA zone setback code, there exists ample light, air, and open space between the proposed outer dimension of our southeasterly rear abutter's new back parking lot, which begins at 27 feet from our proposed setback. The closest point between our carriage house style building and our rear abutting neighbor's residential brick building would be approximately 210 feet. Point 2.3, substantial justice will be done. There will be no benefit to the general public in denying our request, focusing especially on direct abutters and other nearby neighbors with or without sightlines to the deck structure. Conversely, if granted the additional 2 feet depth to our existing narrow deck, the approximate 30 additional square feet of usable deck space for each of the 3 townhouse owners would certainly result in higher usage and enjoyment during the warmer months. Point 2.4, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. We have a sincere belief that upgrading our existing deck will have a positive impact on surrounding properties from an aesthetic standpoint, which in turn will result in increased property value not only for the applicants, but for our surrounding homes as well. As 2 of our 4 direct property line abutters possess well-maintained brick structures allowing for multiple residents, many of the homes in our neighborhood are similar to ours in size and style of architecture common in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Point 2.5, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. Although our carriage house sits on a nearly 1/2 acre parcel of land, aptly described as a quote, odd-shaped lot in various city building documents, we unfortunately have to contend with a very limited existing side physical setback, especially at the southwest facing corner. We feel that our variance request is reasonable based on our limited ability to expand our single structure footprint, and recognize that if granted the variance, further site expansion will not be a realistic endeavor.
Okay, thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, none. Thank you very much. You may take a seat for now.
Thank you. Off to a better start than last week, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am now going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to it? Is there anyone here who would like to speak to, for, or against? See no one rise. Is there anyone on Zoom? No hands are raised. No hands are raised. Okay. With that, I'll close the public hearing. And I'll ask for the board's deliberations, comments, motions. Mr. Neese?
Madam Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion if there's not anybody who wants to discuss it first.
Is there any discussion wanted?
Go
Okay. I'll, second, please.
Second.
We need a motion.
That's right. So,
Move to grant the variance for the application as presented and advertised. Second.
okay. Okay, Mr. Neese, your motion.
I'm going to start with the general comment that this is a pretty minor change to an existing property. It does encroach on what is now considered a side setback with an additional 2 feet. However, when I get to the last criteria, I'll explain why that is not a problem. I'm going to take the first 2 criteria together. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest and would observe the spirit of the ordinance. In part because of the siting of this property, this will not have, and of the siting of the buildings adjacent to this property. This will not affect the health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. It won't have any effect on light, on air, on any of the buildings on either side of it because, as pointed out by the applicant, they're quite distant. This is not going to alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, which is essentially a residential area. Granting the variance will do substantial justice. I can't see any benefit to the public by denial that outweighs the loss to the applicant. Denial will keep them limited to their current size of the deck once it gets replaced, which will affect their enjoyment of the deck to a certain extent, but there's no benefit to the public that has been presented by denial that would support denial. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. There's been no evidence presented that it would. A couple of the abutters have commented in favor of the change and have not raised any concerns about the impact on their property value. Moving on to what is commonly called the hardship criteria. This property does have some special conditions. I think the first is that it's a large lot, but as pointed out by the applicant, it is an unusual shape, and the location of the structure is also unusual in that it's clearly on one side of the property and has minimum setbacks on two sides of the property, including where the deck is. In addition to that, in the context of the neighborhood, the adjoining property structures are not nearby at all. To the rear, for example, is I think a parking lot, and the building is quite distant. So this minor change to the deck is not going to have any impact on any of the butters. Owing to these conditions, I don't believe there's a fair and substantial relationship between the purposes of the ordinance and specific application to the property, and the proposed use, a slightly larger deck, is certainly a reasonable use.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Neese. Mr. Mal, do you agree with the motion or have anything to add?
I agree with everything Mr. Neese said. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. With that, I will call for a vote. Mr. Sullivan, the vote is to approve.
Yes.
Mr. Ram,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Mannel,
Yes.
Mr. Neese,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. You're approved 6-0. Well, I guess you don't care what the final tally is. You're approved. So, okay, thank you. Okay. The next order of business is under Roman numeral 1, new business B. The request of 801 Islington Street LLC owner and Evergreen Yoga and Meditation LLC doing business as Studio 108 for property located at 801 Islington Street, Unit 33. Whereas relief is needed to establish a yoga studio, which requires the following. 1, special exception from 10.440 use number 4.40 to allow a yoga studio more than 2,000 square feet gross floor area. Said property is located on Assessor Map 165, Lot 8, and lies within the Character District 4W zone. Who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is FX Bruton. I'm with Bruton and Barabee. I'm here for the applicant. The applicant, Mike McDonald, is with me if you have any questions. And I did expect the owner, but I'm not sure he's made it yet. Mr. McSherry, excuse me. This is a application where my client would like to rent a studio in the facility known as Gallagher's Place. It's a teeny bit misleading in terms of the name of the company is Evergreen Yoga and Meditation. And they do, in fact, have yoga classes in Stratham where they have another studio. But this site is not, is not intended to be utilized for yoga, which is a very more high-level type of activity in terms of bringing people into the facility. This is going to be limited to Pilates and therapeutic massage, which I'll describe as a much lesser use in terms of actually participants coming to the facility. So we had to find a spot where we fit in the ordinance in terms of what are we, and it was determined that we should be under the yoga label, if you will, but it also says in other studios, so we fit there, and that use is requires a special exception if you exceed 2,000 square feet. The unit that we are trying to rent from the owner is roughly 2,300 square feet. And then I had some discussions with planning, and They were able to deduct about 194 square feet because that was storage. So that brings us down to roughly 2,175. So we're literally just over the edge of actually needing any relief at all. And then now we're using a use that really isn't for yoga, but it's for Pilates. And I'll describe that really runs primarily from 6:30 in the morning to 11:30, when the rest of the plaza, which either has restaurants or other retail things, is not really being even utilized. And that's 1 to 6 students. And in the midday and afternoon, you would have one-on-one or one-on-two classes. So you would have maybe 2 to 3 people actually in the studio after the noon time frame. So very, very low impact in terms of what would even be happening in this studio. So that's kind of the overall aspect of this. And then planning asked, what was the prior use? And we understand from the owner that it was a call center. So if you look at your regulations, the need for parking is identical to a call center. And so we understand that when that occurs, then they're just looking for us to get the special exception. And so with that in mind, we have to, we go through that standard. We look at that the use would be aligned with the goals of the master plan, which is to promote safety, health, and welfare. And we would respectfully submit that a Pilates studio certainly speaks to the health of the citizens of Portsmouth and the region. So we think we established that. A lot of these next things may not apply, but I'll go through them. The first specific special exception criteria is that it's permitted by special exception, and I've described how that is the case. The second is that it's not a hazard to the public or adjacent properties. One thing I failed to mention was we wouldn't in the studio have amplified use or voice. It would all be natural voice. So there's no music, loud music, or microphone activity that's going on as well. So we feel that we satisfy that criteria. No detriment to property values, no vibration, unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, noise, glare, heat. None of that would be part of this proposal at all, so we feel we meet that criteria. No creation of traffic safety hazard or substantial increase in the level of traffic. I think based on how I've described the use, it would be probably the lowest form of traffic use in that entire area. Very limited uses, and mostly occurring off hours vis-a-vis how the rest of that plaza operates, with most of the activity starting at 6:30 and most of it ending around 12:30. The criteria is that it wouldn't create excessive demand on municipal services. Very limited water and sewer, obviously, as I described, so wouldn't meet that as well. Last is no significant increase in stormwater, and it's a unit that's been there for a long period of time and was recently used, and obviously we're not affecting the outside of the building at all. So we think we meet those criteria, and we'd like to certainly answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the first page of your narrative, project narrative, Roman numeral I, the introduction, I'm looking on page 31 of our packet. In the middle of that introduction paragraph, you say, see the floor plan attached as Exhibit A depicting the unit, and see also aerial photo of shopping plaza with location of unit 33 depicted attached as Exhibit B. I didn't see anything labeled as Exhibit A or Exhibit B. And there was an aerial photo, but there's nothing showing where the unit is at. Could you provide a little bit more detail on where in the plaza this unit is located?
Yeah, if, you should all have what looks like this, which is Exhibit A. If you don't have it, I can,
It's in there. It was not
Okay.
labeled as Exhibit A, or
Oh,
at least I didn't see it labeled as Exhibit A.
all right, well, that's Exhibit A.
Okay.
And I do have, I have it, I can look at it, but in the packet, we did identify the area, but I could describe it, which is there's two buildings and the one toward the railroad station, railroad tracks.
Yeah, so,
On the, oh, okay.
so up on the screen is what we have in our packet, which is a black and
Oh.
white photo. There's,
All right, well, I apologize, does that have it? Yeah, okay. Well, I'll show you where it is, but I apologize, we have a depiction of it, and it was supposed to be in this.
If you're going over to the
Yeah.
screen, you'll have to take the
This,
microphone with you, and we ask you to please not touch the screen. You also can use a pointer, if the pointer's working there.
yeah, I think it'd be better if I stood there. I think it's on. So the area that is in question would be on the end, oops.
Oh,
I did
please.
it. Sorry. Would be on the end, and it would be on the second floor in this area right here. I apologize for that. We had it outlined, but I didn't give it to you, I guess.
okay, and then just one other question. There's a couple different names given here, and as you mentioned, there's the Evergreen Yoga and Meditation, and there's also doing business as Studio 108. Is the intent that
Yeah.
this project will be called Studio 108, or will it be called Evergreen, or will it be called something else?
Yeah, Studio 108,
Okay, so you're gonna have Studio 108 at 801 Islington.
correct.
Okay. All right. Double check. Thanks.
Any other
I might
questions?
change that to 801. I thought, but that's a good pickup. Thank you.
It's just tough on dyslexics, but
No, I hear you. I think that's a good observation.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Nees, did I see your hand? No. Wanting to go up? Okay, just one question for me. What are the businesses around this?
The businesses in that,
Yeah,
yeah, so I know that there's restaurants, there's a jewelry store, coffee shop, barber shop, tanning salon, sales office, architectural office is in there. I think Arcove just moved in there, saw that.
okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Bob's is gone, that's all I know.
Yeah, I know it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Is there anyone who would like to speak to, for, or against? And we'll check no one online. Okay, so we will close the public hearing. And board, I'll ask for your thoughts, deliberations, motion. Don't all pipe up at the same time.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception request as advertised and presented.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Mattson, Vice Chair Mattson, your motion.
Yep, going through the criteria, the first is standards are provided by this ordinance for the particular use permitted by special exception. And here, this falls under the yoga studio category, though, as stated, it will be small Pilates classes, so it is permitted by special exception. Second criteria is that no hazard to the public or adjacent property on account of potential fire, explosion, or release of toxic materials, and that doesn't apply to this this type of business with the Pilates. And then the third criteria is that no detriment to property values in the vicinity or change in the essential characteristics of any area, including residential neighborhoods or business and industrial districts, on account of the location or scale of buildings and other structures, parking areas, access ways, odor, smoke, gas, dust, or other pollutant, noise, glare, heat, vibration, or unsightly outdoor storage of equipment, vehicles, or other materials. And again, this is a very low intensity use for very small Pilates classes of a few or less members. And then the next criteria is no creation of a traffic safety hazard or a substantial increase in the level of traffic congestion in the vicinity. And again, because this is such a low intensity use, that should not be an issue. And it was also stated that the particular hours of use are often, it's earlier than most other types of businesses in the vicinity, such as the restaurants that would happen with increased traffic later in the day. And then the next criteria is that no excessive demand on municipal services, including but not limited to water, sewer, waste disposal, police and fire protection in schools. And again, with this instructional Pilates classes and wellness classes, there's no reason to think that that would be an issue. And then finally, no significant increase of stormwater runoff onto adjacent property or streets. And here, there's no external changes being made to the building, so that will also not be an issue.
Okay, thank you. Anything for your second, Mr. Nees?
No, Madam Chair, I concur with everything you said and have nothing to add.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? All right, I'm just going to add, Pilates is not specifically mentioned in our zoning ordinance, however, it is in 10.440 for a yoga or a similar use. So the applicant's attorney represented that it's not specifically for a use mentioned, however, it's for a similar use. Normally, we don't give exceptions or variances for something not mentioned in the zoning ordinance, but this, I believe, very easily folds into that, so. Okay, so with that, the motion is to approve. Mr. Nees,
Yes.
Mr. Mannel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson,
Yes.
Mr. Rayum,
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. You are approved. Thank you. Okay. 221 Woodbury Avenue has been postponed to our June meeting, so the next order of business is 44 Rogers Street, which is as follows. Just, actually, it's quiet down. Okay, so it is new business D, the request of Maximilian Colby Hoshwender, I hope I have that name right, I apologize if I don't, owner and Flybird LLC applicant for property located at 44 Rogers Street. Whereas relief is needed to construct a rear addition to the existing residential structure, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.521 to allow a 3-foot side yard where 10 feet is required. And 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 116, Lot 45, and lies within the mixed residential office and historic districts. Who is here to speak to this application?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Derek Durbin on behalf of Flybird LLC. I have Mark Giannini with me as well from Portsmouth Architects, if you have any questions about the design of what is proposed here. So the property, I'm sure you've all driven down Rogers Street in the past, but it's a very tight street in terms of building density. The lots are relatively small. This lot is no different. It's a small 3,485 square foot lot. Has a 3-story single-family home on it. There's also a detached garage on the property as well, which you'll see on the plans and the tax map. The original part of the home was built in the mid-1800s, but then there is a 2-story L addition that was added at some point thereafter to the rear of the home. The applicant would like to demolish that L addition and construct a 3-story addition in its place within the same footprint to add an additional bedroom and bathroom to the house. There is an exterior staircase back there on the back side of the house. That would be eliminated with the new addition. The addition would not result in any additional encroachment into the left yard, or side yard setback, I'll say, so I don't confuse you, which would otherwise make the property more non-conforming to the dimensional requirements. This is just simply demolishing and adding one story. The applicant did go before the HDC for a work session in early April, and the feedback received was positive. So we don't anticipate any material changes to the design plans from what is being presented to you tonight, should this pass. So with that, I would just turn to the variance criteria.
Unless there's questions, initial questions. Mr. Neese?
I do have a question. I think I know what the answer is, but just to get it on the record. On page 59 of our package, it's, I think, the first page of your narrative application. It just looks to me like in your table, the left yard and right yard setback might,
You've got
the existing conditions have been flipped. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah, and I carried the same mistake over in my notes here. So
Okay.
yeah, that's why I was saying side yard setback, because I knew I'd made a mistake, and unfortunately, I left the plans and my narrative on the printer before I left my office. So I didn't have a.
Okay, so they are just switched. I just
That is
wanted to
correct,
make sure
yes.
that was clear.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan?
Trying to take a look at your Plan A2, it's on page 66 of our packet. So your 3-foot setback off of whichever yard it is, the one that's closest to lot 116-46.
Correct.
There is a little bit of a jut out, and I think later on in the plans it shows that to be about 1.5 feet, which admittedly appears to be what the existing addition sort of, comes straight along the old home and then kind of comes out by a little bit. The intent is to replicate that. I'm curious, is there intent to reuse the existing foundation or somehow build off of what is there, or is the intent to start construction fresh and anew?
Yeah, I'll let Mark answer that since he knows the answer to that question.
Good evening, Mark Giannini from Portsmouth Architects. So the portion of the building that we're looking to demolish and rebuild, unfortunately the foundation, it's actually several foundations because of additions to the building over the years, can't be salvaged. So in this piece that we're talking about, reconstructing, it would be a brand new foundation. And yes, the intent would be that we would follow the existing face of the wall on the right side of the building.
Okay. I mean, it's not a lot. It's 1.5 feet, but at the same point in time, you get a pretty tight area up against that side yard. I'm just curious, is there some structural reason why there's a need to, be that much closer to the side property line as opposed to aligning it purely with the side of the existing home?
I mean, if you go to page, I guess A6, just a few down, where it shows the floor plan. I mean, yeah, back up a few, where it shows the floor plans. The intent was, one, again, to follow the existing footprint that was there. That was part of our presentation to the HDC. The other piece was, it really helps differentiate the original building, which was the rectangle on the bottom of the screen here, from what we're reconstructing. And that is, that was two later additions, as Mr. Durbin mentioned. So, I mean, part of that is, to create some differences and a change in the planes so that you can kind of see what was original and then what was built later.
Okay. Was that discussed specifically at the HDC? Do you know? I don't know.
That was discussed
Okay.
specifically.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Any other questions? So just to follow up, that's a Secretary of the Interior guidelines, those, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Okay, Attorney Durbin, why don't you continue?
Sure. So turning to the variance criteria, granting the variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance or the public interest. This is a situation where current zoning really doesn't reflect the neighborhood reality and the character of this particular area of Portsmouth. It appears just about every house in this neighborhood is 3 stories in height and violates one or both side yard setbacks. Really just a product of, I think, when the lots were developed, which was prior to current zoning. The proposed addition would be in keeping with the aesthetic character of the home, as well as the homes that surround it. It will be in the least impacting location of the property, given the orientation of the existing house on the abutting property to the right, to the north, the bulk of which, as you can see, sits along the opposite boundary. Therefore, it would not create any additional impact upon light, air, and space of the abutting property. So for these reasons, it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, otherwise threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice will be done in granting the variances. Again, it's a very dense neighborhood characterized by undersized lots where most of the homes and buildings are all very close to each other, require some form of relief to expand upon. It would represent a loss to the applicant that isn't outweighed by any corresponding gain to the public to deny the variances for what I would call a modest request to vertically expand the home in a manner that really doesn't create any negative impact to the abutting property. Surrounding property values will not be diminished by granting the variances. Again, I think it's aesthetically in character with what it's surrounded by, aesthetically in character with the existing structures on the property, and really represents an improvement over what exists that won't impact the abutting property in any tangible way. Literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. It's really hard to justify strict application of the ordinance to any of the homes in this neighborhood, since most of them were constructed before current zoning. It's the classic situation where the zoning followed, after the development. Where the existing home and rear addition are located in relation to the bulk of the home in the abutting property, I think that is a special condition of the property, that it won't create any shadowing or any other type of impact upon that property based on where the homes on both properties are located. There wouldn't be any additional setback encroachment. I think the existing nonconformities are a special condition of the property as well. And as a result of these special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions. Here, it's a restriction on the expansion of nonconforming structures as well as setbacks, which are intended to protect light, air, and space of abutting properties. And finally, the proposed use is reasonable. It will not change. It's a use that's permitted by right within the MRO zoning district. So happy to answer any additional questions. And
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for Attorney Durbin? There are none.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. I will open up the hearing to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Or to speak to, for, or against? And there's no one on Zoom. Okay. I will close the public hearing and ask for the board's consideration. Mr. Ram?
Madam Chair, I'm ready to make a motion to approve the requested variance as presented and advertised.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ram. And is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Mr. Mattson, second. Okay, Mr. Ram, your motion, please.
Okay, thank you. I'll just kind of head into the criteria and talk about a couple of the salient points. First of all, the actual relief that's being asked for this project is relatively minor. It's a complete vertical expansion. As the applicant's representatives have indicated, that there is a tear down of the existing addition and a rebuild of it, but essentially when they get done, it will simply look like there was one additional floor that was added to the property. No other relief is needed for anything other than the side yard setback. Coverage, lot coverage, et cetera, remains the same. So with that, first two criteria, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. We typically take those two together, kind of look at those as the essential characteristics of the neighborhood being maintained, or in some way being injurious to it. I think they are being maintained. The bulk of this addition is in the rear of the property. Not bulk. The addition is in the rear of the property. As the applicant's representatives pointed out, these are relatively narrow lots. There's not a lot of visibility for the additional bulk from the general public perspective. On the opposite side of the home is actually sort of an open parking lot area, kind of wide open, which technically would be visible too, but again, it's not really like a street front. and it's just a parking area that's being used for the convenience of a neighboring property. So with that, I don't see any changes to the characteristics. There are a number of other homes that have additions in the area. And again, the ultimately what this is just simply going to look like is a taller addition to compared to what is currently there. So in that sense, it does not excessively change the overall nature of this project relative to that criteria. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. This is our balancing test of the general public's interest in maintaining the zoning ordinance versus the applicant's interest in bettering their home situation. Again, in this case, I think that falls to the applicant, so that criteria is met. They're really just looking for some additional living space, a pretty common situation in many parts of Portsmouth, where the real only opportunity to gain any additional living space is to provide an addition, or in this case, simply expand one additional floor and sort of fill in a little bit on the second floor, so the second floor will be a little bit larger. However, that increase in size on the second floor really is on the side opposite where they are asking release for. It's towards the interior of the property. So really the benefits that the applicant would get, again, compared to an addition that's on the backside of the property, weighs in favor of the applicant. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, overall, this is a relatively modest additional height ultimately to this addition. Will be tastefully presented, will continue to allow this to be a fully functional single-family home. Would be now a 4-bedroom home, so would likely actually increase the value of this home and serve as a positive comparison for other neighboring properties. So with that, would not have a tendency to diminish the values. And then lastly, our so-called hardship criteria. What is unique about this property that says that the ordinance should not be strictly applied to it? A few things is that it is a narrow lot with the home situated to one side of it. That it's, again, an older home that had an addition on the back of it. The applicant is looking to expand it, and while they are not reusing the existing foundation, they have provided a strong rationale from a historic standpoint that because this home is in the historic district, and just to recognize the historic character of this mid-19th century structure, that offsetting it slightly is actually a beneficial visual aid to helping future folks looking at this to understand the nature of what was the original home, what's the addition, being respectful towards that history, even though that does result in a slightly smaller side setback. In this case, too, the neighboring property, as the applicant has pointed out, does have their homes sort of situated in the same manner. In fact, the homes sort of were set up this way where the lot, most of the homes had a sort of an empty space on one side, presumably for leading to a carriage house or something. In this case, a garage on the backside of the applicant's property. So with that rhythm, the negative effects to light and air are diminished, and therefore, because of that positioning of the home, I do think that is a unique characteristic that says that this is actually and with the fact that it's really just an addition of one story on that side of the property, that it's a reasonable request and maintains a single-family residential use, and so with that, I recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Anything for your second, Mr. Mattson? Do you agree with?
Yep, I agree with everything Mr. Williams said, and I would just reiterate that this is an improvement to the existing conditions.
Thank you. All right, so with that, the motion is to approve as presented and advertised. Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Mr. Neese?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. Thank you. Okay, we're just marching along here. The next application is new business E, the request of RRNR Revocable Trust owner for property located at 111 Crescent Way, whereas relief is needed to demolish and reconstruct a detached garage, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.573.20 to allow a 3-foot left side yard and 4-foot rear yard where 8 feet is required from any lot line. Said property is located on Assessor Map 212, Lot 151, and lies within the general residence B district. And who is here to speak to this application?
Hi there, my name's Jeff. I'm the builder for the applicants. The Rogers, they are the homeowners, and they're in the back if you have any specific questions for them.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Similar to the last application, we have an existing garage that the applicants are seeking to raise and replace within the exact dimensions that are already there. So the crux of our argument, I guess, is we have a unsafe building where structurally is seeing some dry rot. Framing is close to grade. We have large cracks in the concrete that are differentially settled an inch or two. So our intention is to replace an unsafe building with a new code-compliant building, but we need relief from the dimensional regulations in the zoning. So that's why we're here today.
Okay, please continue with your application.
Sure. Getting into the 5 variance criteria, not contrary to public interest, as the project maintains status quo of the density and layout. The idea here, of course, is that, again, we're replacing a building that I would deem as unsafe. And to give you an idea, when I push on this wall, you could just say the wall deflects a little more than I'd like it to. The intent, again, is to replace in kind and in the existing footprint, and no new encroachment into further into the setbacks would be done by the new building. Second, we are observing the spirit of the ordinance as we are, again, replacing an existing building in a neighborhood where the essential character is upheld because there are several similar garages and similarly small lots, as I would call them, where it's hard to build a garage with a driveway without going into the beyond the setbacks. Substantial justice is done for the applicants as the general public would not be experiencing any harm. In fact, I would argue that putting a new beautiful garage in its place would be improving public interest and substantial justice. Again, the values of the surrounding properties would just be improved by a lesser lack of an eyesore, let's say, and again, a new beautiful building that's similar to the ones around it. And there are special conditions because it's a small lot with deficient frontage, and it makes it very, very difficult to adhere to the setbacks. Reasonable use, again, this is a garage in a single-family residence neighborhood, completely reasonable use to want a new garage to replace an unsafe one. There's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the setback ordinance and their specific application to this lot. Moving the garage to a compliant location would be, again, very difficult based on the existing driveway and orientation of the house and angles of the lot. Any questions from the board?
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Sullivan?
If the answer to this question is in the application, I apologize for missing it.
Sure.
But what does the term structural racking mean?
When you have you want your building to be square and plumb, right? Over time, a building can start to lean if it's not properly supported laterally to resist the loads that are on it. Does that make sense?
So in the photograph that showed the structural racking, we should see the buildings leaning?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I didn't include a photo with a level, but it's an inch or two out of level over a 6-foot length.
Thank you.
Mr. Ram?
I actually have a question for staff, if I may. So and this really just speaks to the magnitude of the variance request. The determination from staff was that the height of the building is 8 feet, thus the setback requirement is 8 feet. But I'm just looking at the applicant's drawing sheet 404, it's on page 84 of our packet. And just wondering with this odd sort of configuration of the roof, how did we come to the 8-foot conclusion? Do you know where that number came from?
Yeah, I mean, it has a different height on one side than the other, so it was the average of the two.
Okay. All right, so we didn't use the complicated, how tall is my roof formula or any of that kind of stuff? One that requires like multidimensional calculus to work it out.
It's the midpoint between the peak and the eaves.
Yep.
And in this case, the eaves are a different height on one side than the other,
Yep.
so it was the
Agreed.
average of those.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. I have a question. So the structure is being replaced in kind. There's a garage. What is in the rest of that structure?
It's appears to me to be basic storage, and I think there's like a old shag rug in there. The owners are relatively new and haven't quite settled into the garage because of its condition.
Right.
So
And
I would say storage.
will that continue to be used as storage?
I would expect storage or workshop or typical garage usage.
Okay. And there's a little tiny structure next to that. What is that used for?
I might have to call in the experts on that one.
Oh, it looks like a shed or something.
Which picture?
Oh, I believe before the house was sold, there was like a,
It was like one of those Amazon sheds that you can assemble yourself. We took that, we sold that. That's gone.
Okay, alrighty. And is that, in the corner of the property, I can't really tell from our pictures, it looks like you have a sort of two fences, like a almost aluminum fence and then perhaps a wooden fence. Is that correct?
there's a jog in the fence, and yes, they are made of different materials.
Okay, so the lot line is the wooden fence?
I believe it's the fence beyond.
Okay, I mean, that's not, I mean, your request relates to the other side, but I was just curious as to where your real lot line was on that side.
Right, yeah, based on my field measurements, it's closer to the, I guess it would be further back fence. And then, yeah, there appears to be a jog for reasons I can't speak to, because the lot line is straight.
And does that extend to the back of the property, or is that just on that other side of the property? That sort of double fencing? Okay, you'll need the microphone, and you will need to actually, please not touch the screen.
Okay. Yeah, so the part where the jog goes from here, and it was really to bring the fence to the edge to keep our dog contained. The other fence goes to about here, probably the lot to the lot line between that covers the back of that fence. Oops, sorry.
Okay,
Covers
Okay.
the lot over here, whichever lot that is.
all right. All right, okay, thank you. I got that. Mr. Ram, looks like you have a follow-up.
Sorry, yeah, another question if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. This one's actually for the applicant or the applicant's representative. So some of your photo views, particularly photo 4, it looks like your garage is like super close to the neighboring garage. But the one that I think probably best illustrates it is photo 5, which, you know, shows a little bit more room between the two garages. In your professional opinion, is there any concerns about your ability to construct the garage, and most importantly for future maintenance of this, you know, relatively modest one-story high structure with that kind of narrow distance between the two garages?
There is a structural undermining concern. On the very cute plan set that's in the application, I indicated that my intention is to use a shallow foundation as is allowed by the IRC for buildings under 600 square feet. So I'm expecting to go 18 or 24 inches deep for a footing, rather than any deeper to avoid undermining the adjacent garage or fence for that matter.
Okay. And then once constructed, I mean, a ladder can reasonably be erected to do basic maintenance on that side of the garage structure.
Yes, yeah, we're not changing the distance between roofs, which is about 36 inches or so.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. So, with that, I will open the hearing to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? 2, 4, or against? And there's no one on Zoom. Okay, all right, so I will close the public hearing and ask for the board's consideration. Anyone? Mr. Ram?
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the applicant's request as presented and advertised.
Okay, and second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Sullivan. Okay, your motion, Mr. Ram?
Yes, thank you. As with our last application, this is a situation of sort of a rebuild, and in this case, there is no vertical expansion. It is simply a 100% rebuild of a garage structure that probably goes back many years. I don't know if the applicant has actually established when it was built, but if not, original to the home, circa 1917, is probably not too long afterwards. So understandably, over time, without proper maintenance, could become an issue. The applicant is looking to replace it in kind in the exact same location. It is a fairly sizable structure in the sense that, as the chair asked, there's another sort of added on shed area on the side of it, shed/workshop, whatever sort of outdoor uses you might have for it, which does sort of add to some of the bulk that's going on here. But again, overall, it's a pretty modest addition, or excuse me, accessory structure. The averaging of the height is 8 feet, which is quite reasonable, and it can, even though it is close to the property edges, it probably can be maintained satisfactorily going forward. So with that, our criteria: granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. This speaks to the general characteristics of the neighborhood and what we're trying to accomplish. In general, light and air is what we're mostly concerned about. This structure has existed for many, many years, is accompanied by a similar structure for the neighboring property. These homes, sort of have this shared driveway arrangement. So each structure is sort of forced to be close to the other one just because of the general nature of the small backyards and the driveway arrangement located between these two closely spaced structures. So with that, I mean, light and air is while impeded, is really not a large concern. It's really two garages sort of impeding on each other. It's a situation that appears to have existed for a long period of time and is not being intensified in any way, shape, or manner by what's being asked for here. Again, it's something that existed for the neighbors on the backside. It's not getting any taller. It's not getting any closer. It has, served its function and would continue to impact those properties in a very minimal way, like it has done for likely several decades now. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. This is our balancing test between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the benefit to this specific applicant. Again, the applicant is getting the benefit of sort of restoring their garage space back to being fully usable and safe, and having some additional storage area, which again for these homes is a very valuable commodity. And they are not asking for anything additional in terms of something that's been there for a long period of time. It is the same. So there's really no general public interest that would outweigh the benefits that the applicant is giving. Granting the variance would not diminish the value of surrounding properties. Again, this is really just taking an existing structure, renovating it, making it in better condition, If anything, it adds to the value of this specific property and likely has trickle-down impacts in a positive manner to those surrounding properties. And lastly, little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. And again, I've kind of spoken to that where the layout of this neighborhood that was constructed hastily back in 1917, the close property lines, relatively narrow, yet we're sort of set up with driveways and the expectation that there's garages. They're are seen in other areas of this neighborhood as well. By necessity, they are going to need to be close with the shared driveway. So I think that's kind of a characteristic of this property that says that in general, encompassing all of those similar properties in that zoning district, that this property has some need for this structure to be close to the property lines, front and rear. Again, it's a modest structure in terms of height overall. Its impact on the neighbors is very minimal. There is some additional structure, but it's towards the interior of the property, away from the setback. There is a little bit of an impact to the back setback, but again, this is the lowest portion of the structure. And again, overall, it's still an 8-foot high structure. So with that, I recommend approval.
Thank you. Anything for your second, Mr. Sullivan?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. So I will be supporting this. I had some concerns just because of the size of the structure. However, that does not deal with the relief that's being requested here, because it's the left yard and the rear yard. The right yard is fine. Little concerns about the lot lines, but that will be probably most likely addressed when the building permit is pulled, and I think it's likely they will probably need a survey just given how close they are. But I am going to support it. So any other comments? Okay. So the motion is to approve, and the variance request is presented and advertised. Mr. Nees?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. For the next one. Okay. Thank you. And we will move on to the next and final order of business for today. I understand, well, let me just read it into the record. It is new business F, the request of Hill Hanover Group, LLC, care of JPK Properties, LLC, owner for property located at 181 Hill Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish 3 existing multifamily buildings and to construct 2 new 3-story multifamily buildings connected by an underground parking garage and elevated courtyard area, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.5A 41.10A to allow 1,008 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit where 3,000 feet is required. B, a building footprint of 5,232 square feet where 2,500 square feet is the maximum. C, a building footprint of 3,035 square feet where 2,500 square feet is the maximum. D, 18% open space where 25% is required. And 2, a variance from section 10.440 to allow 10 dwelling units in a building where up to 8 dwelling units are permitted. Said property is located on Assessor Map Lot 125, Lot 14, and lies within the Character District 4L1 district. Before Attorney Durbin, you are here to represent the application. I understand that you would like additional time to present your application.
Yeah, I just didn't want to surprise you when I got here, so I telegraphed that ahead of time and planned to request it when I reached the podium. So.
Okay, so is everyone in favor of giving the applicant an additional 5 minutes?
5 minutes?
5 minutes? Is that what you were saying?
I'm limited to 15, right, with everything. I hope that we can do that. It's just the plan set is a little more robust than you might get on a lot of projects. So I wanted to have the architect an opportunity to speak to the plans.
Okay, so with 25 minutes, this is the last application that we have. Is the board fine with 25 minutes for?
I'll move quickly.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move that we allow the applicant 25 minutes for their discussion.
Okay, second, and is there a second? Second, okay, everyone in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so with that, I just have a preliminary question. So your relief is for 10 dwelling units. In our packet from the staff memo, it says 12 residential with a total of 16 residential units?
It's 10 in one building.
Oh, yes, that helps. Okay.
Yeah, there's the
That's right.
restriction of 8 in one building. Yeah,
Okay,
in the
all right.
CD4L1. Yep.
Okay, I missed that. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, I'll try to keep my introduction short. So, again, for the record, Derek Durbin, I'm here on behalf of Hill Hanover Group LLC. The member of Hill Hanover Group LLC is here as well, Bruce Summer. Jeff Sabin from JPK Properties, who is the manager of the property. I have Corey Belden from Altus Engineering, as well as Richard Deschardins and Mark Giannini, again, from Portsmouth Architects. They'll be happy to answer any questions you have that get into the specifics of the plans. So 181 Hill Street is a 16,127 square foot lot. It has 3 separate 4-unit multi-family buildings on it. Each is a little over a century old based on the research we've done. One of the unique, if not the most unique aspect of the property is that it is the largest CD4L1 zone property in this area of Portsmouth, which I laid out for you in Exhibit B of my narrative. Won't go into great detail now on, but you'll see that it's more than 2.5 times larger than the next largest property in this particular area of CD4L1 zoning. Another unique aspect of the property that it is bordered on 3 sides by streets. Hanover Street, Autumn Street on one side, and on a third side by Hill Street, which is actually a private street that is half owned by the applicant, half owned by the owner of 89 Foundry Place, where the Foundry Place residences are. So it essentially forms its own block in that sense. In addition, another unique aspect of the property is that it does sort of lie within a transitional area between zoning districts, also between, I guess, what people would consider distinct parts of Portsmouth, the downtown center, as well as the West End. Building densities, residential densities vary quite a bit within this transitional area. Land uses also vary as well. Here, the prevailing building and residential densities around Hill Street are higher than what would be found in some parts of the West End, probably a little less than what you would find in the downtown and northern tier. The massing, size, height of the buildings also start to taper down from the northern tier and downtown towards the West End. 2 examples of this are 89 Foundry Place, 361 Hanover Street, which border the property the north and west, respectively. They're both zone CD4, have much, one has a much larger building, much higher density than exists or is proposed here. And then you have another, of course, that is in the works, which is in a similar category, slightly different in its scale. And so with that, other than the existing nonconformities associated with the property, which I know Mark or Richard plans to touch upon, you'll see it's nonconforming with respect to max building block length, open space, and lot area per dwelling unit in the existing condition. The buildings are tired. I don't think it, I think they probably tell that story themselves by looking at them. And, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try to rehabilitate the buildings. Instead, it certainly makes much better financial sense for the applicant to actually redevelop the property. So with that, the applicant is proposing to redevelop the property, demolish the existing buildings, and develop 2 separate buildings connected by an elevated courtyard, underground garage, with one building having 8 units in it. That would be Building B, and the other, Building A, having 10 units in it. So with that, in the spirit of being brief, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and Richard to go through the plan set that's before you.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Mark Giannini from Portsmouth Architects. If you can go to the next slide. All right. Sheet C2 here is the existing site plan. So just to highlight some of the things that Mr. Durbin already mentioned, so the existing buildings consist of, 3 separate 2-story multifamily structures. Each of these have 4 units in them for a total of 12. As he mentioned, on 3 sides, it is bordered by streets. On the west side, or the left of the page here, kind of left bottom, there is an existing 3-story condo building. Hill Street on the north side, basically at the Autumn Street intersection, becomes a private drive. This private drive continues to the west and crosses 2 additional lots, and then basically connects back to Hanover Street. Even with the new property or project that's been proposed for the old Heinemann building, this access easement will continue as well as the street. The existing parking for the project consists of 10 surface parking spots. There's 2 driveways between the 3 buildings that provide parking, and then there are 6 parallel spots along the private part of Hill Street. If we go to the next slide. This sheet is showing a density analysis and kind of refers back to some of the items that Mr. Durbin explained earlier, including the uniqueness of the lot within CD4L1. Again, it's the largest lot in this neighborhood and the zone. As you can see, all of the smaller lots kind of surrounding it to the south, west, and east. The property is about 4 times bigger than all those adjacent lots that are in the same zone. The first table kind of here in the middle just illustrates that 23 of the 25 properties are non-conforming as far as density. If you look at the column on the right, or the tables on the right, the ones that are identified as, now I can't see up there, CD4, also show that they also don't meet density. And then as you get to the other 2 zones just below that, CD5 and CD4 maybe, those don't have any red in the tables only because those properties don't have the same density requirements as far as number of units go. Moving on to the next slide. The next few slides are pictures of the existing conditions, also just to give you context. So the top 3 images show the 3 existing structures from the front and then the back on the lower images. Moving on to the next slide. These give you, the idea of what the approach looks like from different aspects of the neighborhood. The upper 3 images are starting from the Bridge Street approach to head up Hill Street. And then the lower 3 images are basically up beyond the property. On the left side there, you can see the new Foundry residence at Foundry Place. That is in a different zone, but it is 4 stories and, one of our direct abutters. Moving on to the next slide. Again, additional contextual images. These are all take place on Hanover Street. The one in the middle upper row there is an approach from Parker Street. Right now there's a development it's under construction for that particular lot, which will be a 3-story single-family home with an attached ADU. So that particular view and the one to the right, will change in the near future. The ones on the lower are from other parts of Hanover, including some of the direct abutters. Moving on from there, the next slide. So C2 here is the proposed site plan. We can talk more about the redevelopment. So as Attorney Durbin mentioned, the proposed reconstruction is 2 buildings. On this plan, it's labeled Building 1 and Building 2, but in your application, we're describing it as Building A and Building B. The Building A on the left is 3 stories with 2 units basically per floor for a total of 6. And then Building B is 3 stories We're proposing 10 units within that building. And then there'd be a courtyard to provide open space between the two, and also conductivity between the front and the back of the site from Hanover Street to the private way back on Hill Street. It will also provide access to units on both sides of the building. Units within Building A are going to vary from just over 1,000 square feet to just under 1,400 square feet. Units in Building B are going to range from just over 800 square feet to just over 2,100 square feet. The varying sizes of units provides variety of the unit types, so we can provide 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom, depending on which unit you're in. As far as parking for the proposed unit, we're proposing 36 total parking spaces provided as part of the redevelopment, 12 more than exists now, and obviously result in a net increase. 17 of these spaces will be in the parking garage that's below the two buildings, and access to the parking garage is going to be off Autumn Street on the right. There'll be a recessed entry into the parking garage that will slope down underground. That'll provide in and out access. We'll have 5 additional surface parking spots along the private way in the back. There'll be 4, including 1 handicap spot, and there'll also be additional handicap spots in the parking garage. One other part of the project that exists now and will continue with the redevelopment that I forgot to mention earlier is that the applicant has 14 deeded spots that are in the parking garage across the street in the residence of Foundry Place. So that provides an additional level of parking for the project. Even though it's off-site, it's directly across the private way. There's access from the side of the building to get into the parking garage, so residents don't have to walk that far to access those additional parking spots. Next slide. So the redevelopment plans were scaled down from a version that was that the applicant and the design team presented during TAC and a preliminary planning board for a conceptual review earlier this year. At that time, there was a single building with 18 units that was proposed, again, with underground parking. If we go to the next slide. No, it's not in there at the moment, but it's in the set somewhere, which we can look at later if need be. But basically, it was proposed to have one entire one building that was continuous from what we're proposing now. At the TAC and planning board meeting, one of the planning board members expressed a desire to see the mass broken up. So we've gone back, redeveloped it. We've also, the applicant has had several conversations with surrounding neighbors to get feedback really over the past year, which has affected the design, the previous design as well as the current design. And it kind of leads us to where we are now. Based on the feedback that we received from the neighbors as well as planning board members. So at this point, I will let Richard walk you through and talk more about the proposed buildings.
Good evening, everyone. Richard Desjardins with Portsmouth Architects. Our architectural intention is to strike an appropriate balance between the adjacent neighborhood context and the zoning ordinance. After site analysis and several iterations, we landed on a design of 2 distinct building masses connected at the basement with an underground parking garage. We have applied 2 zoning allowed and more residentially appropriate roof forms, a hip-to roof on Building A, which is the yellow building in this rendering, and a mansard roof for Building B, which is the blue building. This was an important design decision while approaching this site because there's roughly a 5-foot grade difference from west to east of the property. With this, we have aligned the eave of Building A with the property to the left in this image, 349 Hanover Street, and switched roof forms on Building B to help give off a stepping appearance to match this grade difference across the lot. The design also features other vernacular elements such as box bays, porches, dormers, windows, cladding. Altogether, as a team, we believe that this approach, approaching the site with an architecturally compatible multifamily structure that is aligned with the character district, as opposed to other more contemporary and boxy looking buildings of this nature. If we go to the next slide, you will see 332 Hanover Street illustrated onto the currently empty lot. This property is currently being developed at this point, and this here is just to show a visual comparison of what will eventually be there and what's getting built currently. And then if we flip through the next two slides, you will see our design nestled in the context based on the city's 3D model. You will see that the massings themselves don't necessarily stand out in comparison to some of the direct adjacent lots, such as Foundry Place directly behind the property to the north, as well as 349 Hanover Street to the west. And now if we flip over, and these are just views as well, just at the public view, so at grade. And if we flip to A9, this is a street section to show off the stepping effect that I mentioned earlier, and in direct relation to the maximum building heights and the neighboring buildings. You can also see in this image directly behind 181 Hill Street, which is sharing a lot line with, is 99 Foundry Place, a flat roof 51 unit multifamily building, which is in the CD4 zone. I would also like to just draw your attention here to the part in the top left, which is a max building height at rear level marker. Derek will go into more depth on this, but this line, which you'll see in other parts of the elevations, represents an area of the property that can be developed 1 story and 10 feet taller than the rest of the property. As a team, we've elected to not explore this, to maintain a smaller building form that is more consistent with the neighborhood in these building typologies. And if we start flipping through the next few sheets, we'll see, especially in this view here, the 15-foot wide courtyard that will serve as the primary building entrances for both of these buildings from the rear private way and Hanover Street. This buffer helps introduce light and air to the property that is more aligned with the zoning than the current existing conditions. And we can flip through some of these other elevations. So this is the neighboring elevation towards 349 Hanover Street. The next one is of the private way, the north elevation. And then the following one is along Autumn Street, which is where we are proposing our basement garage entry. And then the following sheet, we'll see the basement floor plan. This is now depicting how the proposed building will be providing 1 minimum parking space per unit, which is completely off the street and within the building, within both building footprints. Within both of these buildings in this particular floor, we are accommodating 2 underground lobbies for elevators, stairs, and mechanical spaces. The next sheet will take us up to the first floor plan to start illustrating some of our various unit sizes, entries, porches, and a ADA accessible ramp off the back towards the private way to provide access to the elevated courtyard. In comparison to the existing buildings, the proposed project has been pulled off of the left side yard, rear yard, and secondary front yard. By doing so and incorporating the courtyard, we are improving open space while remaining under the maximum allowed 60% building coverage within the front line build out and max building block length constraints, which are depicted in the zoning ordinance. And the next sheet, as Mark, can you go back one? Perfect. As Mark mentioned earlier, the interior of these units haven't necessarily been laid out just yet. However, it's our intention to provide a total of 16 unique units varying from 807 square feet to 2,194 square feet. This will be a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. This small design decision invites and allows for a mixed demographic to occupy the building and encourage diversity within the building itself. And on A17, the following sheet, you'll see a hatched area off the rear. This is the area of the property that is allowed to be developed up to 4 stories and 50 feet above average grade, which is also depicted in Exhibit A. But we'll get to the last sheet here, which is sheet A18 that Mark alluded to earlier. This is an elevation of the original proposal that we presented to the Planning Board and the Technical Advisory Committee. It was originally designed as one large building to appear as 3 with 2 more units than we currently are proposing. We ultimately decided to reconsider this approach based on further site analysis and feedback from the Planning Board and neighbors. So if we go to the next slide, this will bring us back to A5. And based on this iterative process, we've ultimately landed on the proposed 2-building approach for our abnormally large CD4 L1 site. As a team, we believe that this proposal helps transition the northern CD4 and CD5 zones to a more residentially less intense southern zone in both architectural design and density. And with that, I'm just going to hand it back over to Derek to go through the variance criteria.
So Attorney Durbin, you have 4 minutes left.
Okay, I'll speak quickly. Starting with the criteria, granting the variance does not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance or the public interest. Speaking to the residential density variances first, there are 2 of which. If you look at sheet A1 in the applicant's plan set, you'll see that the proposed density is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. Several of the properties have greater densities, including 3 of the abutting properties, that being 89 Foundry Place, 349 Hanover Street, which is also zoned CD4L1, as well as 361 Hanover Street, as it will be built. Through the current future master plan, an emphasis has been placed on providing diversified housing opportunities and density in and around the downtown and West End, where adequate off-street parking can be provided. This project does satisfy that goal in every respect. Speaking to the what I would call the building-related variances, the applicant seeking 2 variances related to the footprint sizes as well as open space. Of course, open space is being increased from 3% to 18%. As it stands on the plans, it's actually 21.3, but we gave a little bit of deviation to allow for changes that could be made by the planning board. The maximum building footprint restriction was intended to restrict building density on the smaller lots that characterize much of the CD4L1 zoning district to avoid a sense of overcrowding on lots. This property is truly an outlier in this particular CD4L1 zoned area of Portsmouth, by far the largest, many times larger than most of the surrounding properties, which vary in size from 1,000 to 3,000 square feet. Of course, you have the property next door at 349 Hanover Street, which actually has a higher residential density and is quite a bit larger. I'm sorry, smaller than this property. The massing volume and height of the proposed buildings, as Richard and Mark have discussed, is context sensitive. We'll add a natural transition and step down from the Foundry Place lot as well as the former Heineman property to the surrounding properties on Hanover Street. Richard also mentioned that we've purposely chosen not to explore an additional height in the rear of the property. Again, it is an area of Portsmouth characterized by building density, population density. If you did an analysis of surrounding properties, you would find very few that actually comply with the dimensional requirements of the ordinance. And I would argue that what the applicant is asking for relief related to the footprints is offset by the improvements to the property, which allow for greater setbacks, light, air, space, 5 to 6 times the open space that presently exists. The property will also be brought into conformance to the maximum building block length requirement. So for these reasons, granting the variances, I believe, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Will observe The public interest will not threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Substantial justice will be done in granting the variances. Again, equitable balancing test the board's familiar with. In this case, the property is extremely costly to maintain given the age of the buildings. It's more cost effective to redevelop the property, make better use of the lot at this time. Denial of the variances would result in a vastly underutilized lot with buildings that are extremely costly to maintain, lack many redeeming qualities in their existing condition. Surrounding property values will not be diminished by granting the variances. If anything, they should benefit from the demolition and replacement of the existing buildings with new tastefully designed buildings that have similar design elements to other surrounding buildings that also allow for more open space on the property. Finally, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. The property does have special conditions, many of which I've alluded to already, that distinguish it from surrounding properties, including its size, location, existing nonconformities, and the fact that it's bordered on 2 sides by public streets and a 3rd by a private street. In addition, the property provides the opportunity for more than sufficient off-street parking to support a much greater use than most other properties are capable of providing. And again, the property is the largest CD4 L1 zone property in this area of Portsmouth. The 2,500 square foot maximum building footprint requirement does appear to be more a reflection of the character of the lot sizes in this particular area of Portsmouth than anything else. This property can support buildings of a greater size and density than its CD4L1 counterparts without looking overcrowded or looking out of context with what it's surrounded by. When you apply the 2,500 square foot limitation of the property, it actually results in total building footprint on the property of just 51% of the entire lot, to put it in perspective. So while the max building footprint is limited to that 2,500 square feet, the ordinance simultaneously requires a front lot line build out of 60 to 80% to promote greater building density along the public streets that border the property. In this case, obviously, the property is bordered on 2 sides by public streets. But these competing objectives of the max building footprint requirement and this more maximum front lot line build out result in a situation where you can't develop this property in a manner that perfectly aligns with the spirit and intent of the ordinance, or of both provisions of the ordinance. So as a result of these special conditions, the ordinance creates a unique and disproportionate burden upon a property of this size with its characteristics in comparison with surrounding properties, such that there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions and their application of the property. Finally, we would submit that the proposed use is reasonable. It's in line with surrounding uses, density, building, as laid out in the plans. So with that, I'll conclude. Hopefully I came close to sticking to the
3 minutes.
Oh, I was so close. I was trying.
Okay, are there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Sullivan?
What caught my attention about this application is that you were going to demolish the existing buildings so that you will be beginning with a vacant lot. So my question therefore is, couldn't the instructions to the designer or architect been design a building that's in compliance with the zoning ordinance? And if the answer to that question is no, the second question would be, why not?
It would leave the property completely out of context with the rest of the what it's surrounded by. It would leave a very vastly underutilized property with, well, for example, if you were to do the lot line build out in compliance with the ordinance and you applied the 25-foot, 100-foot max building footprint, you're going to, I can let Richard speak to this, or Mark as well, you're going to end up with some very oddly configured, shaped looking buildings on the property, and you're still going to end up with, you'll end up with even more of the property probably, I don't want to say open space, but open, not with a building on it.
And when you use the term underutilized, you mean you wouldn't be able to maximize the financial value of the construction?
No, I think you could, okay, so to answer that question, you can develop the property. So if you develop it, you put these oddly shaped buildings on it, whatever, okay, and you meet the strict requirements of the ordinance, what you're going to end up with is larger units, significantly higher price points to offset the redevelopment cost. And probably maximizing what you can of the building height at that point. So this is where we try to strike that balance that Richard alluded to in his presentation.
I have to say the conclusion that I would draw from what you just said is that it would be possible to design a building in compliance with the ordinance.
You can, if you strip most properties down, you can develop something in compliance with the ordinance, but I don't think that's the question. Does it meet the spirit and intent of the ordinance? And I think in that respect, no. The end result is something that is way out of character with the surrounding area, with the neighborhood, and does not meet the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Can you meet strict compliance? Sure. It would appear so. However, again, you're trading strict compliance for something that's out of character and out of balance, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to start off, there's a few different areas I want to talk to, but on your cover sheet A0, it's page 102 of our packet. So on page 5, and you reiterated again in your discussion, you talked about how the build-out requirement is at odds for your property because of its size with the frontage, right? Front lot line build-out is in opposition to the total square footage that you allowed per structure. And I have some empathy for what you're saying with regards to your property. This zone is a 3,000 square foot minimum lot size. It's a lot area per dwelling unit of 3,000 square feet. So that kind of says I want a single family home on a pretty small lot. And then my building size is 2,500 square feet, which means that I'm, got some room around it, but probably can meet the 60 to 80% build out. Your lot is 5 times larger than that. I suppose that you could put like 5 of these single family homes somehow if that's what you wanted to do. But I think there is a case to be made that the current structures on the property are they're apartments, they're multiple dwellings, and that your lot is unique relative to what the zoning ordinance, mental model for the zoning ordinance is. That said, so you're kind of saying, hey, I'd have to build like an H-shaped building if I'm going to meet the build-out requirement, but only I'm allowed so many square feet to execute it. My concern on your sheet A0 is your front lot line build-out, 60% to 80% max. This is in the top portion of the table off to the right. The existing is 72%. You're proposing 78%. So really, you're still proposing something that's at the higher end of that allowable range. So I understand how you're saying, hey, 2,500 is too small, but at the same point in time, what you're proposing is still, you're kind of maxing out what the zoning ordinance allows. So I just didn't know if you could speak to a little bit on that, or one of your staff here that can talk to that.
I can let either Richard or Mark speak to that specifically. I don't want to get into design considerations too much, but yeah.
So just to specifically address the comment about the 72% of the existing lot line build out, that 72% is also causing the existing condition to be non-compliant in the max building block length, as well as the open space, because the space between the buildings doesn't meet the zoning defined spacing to actually consider them separate.
Sure, it's also additionally parking, so which is not open space either.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess on the total lot line build out, I mean, why are you up near, why is it 80% versus the lower end 60%, I guess? Just what drove the design that puts you into that regime?
I guess I'll just add to that at least part of the decision to be closer to the 80%, as you pointed out, was really to provide that open space in between. So the build out, the lot line, or the build out of the lot line includes basically the entire footprint of the parking garage. So that includes the area that we've got the courtyard, where we're adding more air and light, and basically providing two separate buildings. So that's really where we got that higher, instead of having one building that maybe has shorter and minimize that courtyard space. We were providing more open space between the two proposed buildings.
Okay. So I'll have the two of you up here. So one of the main characteristics that I think of when I think of the existing buildings is the open porches that are really on both the Hanover side and on the private street on the Hill Street side. It really does provide kind of like an interaction with passersby in the neighborhood. Admittedly, currently that's a skeleton mannequin that's out there 365 days a year. One of the current renters has a very impressive catio that's out there, although the cat runs back into the apartment if you kind of get too close to it. But it's still a pretty impressive structure. It really kind of adds to the streetscape of that portion of Hanover Street. And it's sort of duplicated in some other properties, not as much, though. I'm not going to tell you like every property has a porch. When you were coming through this design, I know that there's like Juliet balconies for most of the apartments that are, I'm not sure what the depth is, probably like 3 feet or something along those lines. It's certainly not the same kind of interactive feel. Was there any talk about trying to recreate that sort of interactive nature in the new buildings, or is any of the open space set up or configured to try and sort of recreate some of that interactiveness with the streetscape community?
One of our intentions with at least the open courtyard, which really hasn't been thoroughly designed yet, is to be more inviting than just a couple planters on there, to start activating that particular area, since it is going to be serving as the main entry point for these units. So our goal is to bring some life to that particular area, to both sides of the street, and connect through to 99 Foundry Place. If you remember correctly, there's a U-shaped courtyard on the opposite side that this is almost aligned with. So it really starts to create that connection and that visual connection as well through the buildings.
Okay. Also on this table, about 2/3 of the way down is facade glazing, 20% minimum, 40% maximum. For the existing is not calculated, okay, but for the proposed is also not calculated. Is there some reason why we don't know what that, and I'm just concerned for future variance, is that anything that's anticipated, or are you comfortable that your project is definitely going to end up in the 20 to 40 range?
I feel fairly confident that we'll end up in that that particular range. We just didn't want to nail down a specific dimension because when you start getting into egress window sizing, it dedicates like a specific size of window, and we haven't fully committed to interior layouts yet, and that can easily change the percentage opening in that particular instance.
Okay. And then I'm not sure if Attorney Durbin wants to weigh in on this one, but so your calculation that you have, that you talk about here, and then it's actually detailed in a couple of pages down on page 104 of our packet, your drawing C2. You did calculate out 21.4%, yet you're asking for 18% relief. And I understand you want this 3% cushion. I'm trying to understand what this cushion is for. I mean, typically, I would expect a project to have a pretty good sense of what its open space would be at this point in time.
Corey Belden with Altus Engineering. Yes, we do provide the open space calculation on sheet 2. That came to 23,431 square feet, 21.3%. However, we've found that throughout planning board process, utility requirements, we could be required to have, another, pad on site, some other additional features. We have some calculations that we just wanted to make sure that we had the flexibility for any minor changes that did occur from here through the planning board process. So that gives us the flexibility to make some very minor adjustments to the site plan during planning board and still meet that 18%.
Okay, and then if I may continue, Madam Chair, sorry, I'm kind of going on. And then on that same plan, you show there's as you talked about, I think you said actually 6, but I count 5 on-street parking spots. One of which is a accessible parking spot, which is a plus. I'm curious about the other 4. You are currently, according to the table 2 pages prior, you have 11 more parking spaces than what you actually need. What is the reason for the need for those 4 parking spots? And more importantly, when you're running short of open space, and the parking does not count toward open space, as far as I understand the calculation, why would you dedicate that to parking as opposed to adding to your open space? Because by my calculation, there's 640 square feet there. That would be roughly 4%, because every percent is about 161 square feet. That could, with 21%, bring you up through to 25 and eliminate one of the laundry list of variances that you're asking for this project.
So based on the parking requirements for the site, there's 16 units, there's 20 required parking spaces. We've provided 21 total parking spaces on site, with one of them being an ADA accessible stall. So 20 spaces meeting that requirement plus the 1 ADA additional stall.
So is there an intent to not take advantage of the off-site spots then that are currently being taken advantage of, or what's the?
There isn't the owner does have lease agreement, I believe, or ownership of off-site parking. However, we did, the intent was to meet all of the parking requirements on site with the basement garage and with these spaces, which would be primarily the visitor parking stalls, which would not be under, the basement garage would be for residents primarily, and these exterior surface stalls would be the visitor parking stalls on site.
Okay, that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any, Vice Chair Mattson?
Yes, just building upon the previous comments. So we'll put aside the lot area per dwelling for a second, but looking at the other relief being asked for, and considering for a second like what the zoning ordinance is trying to get at. So your max building footprint is too big, and you have more dwelling units per building than allowed. And the open space is also not met. So it seems like the ordinance would be pushing for more like what is already there of 3 separate buildings. And I took your comment about the front lot line build out, and I get that, but it would just seem to me that if this was broken up into 3 buildings, you could still achieve 60% build out, while also becoming much closer to meeting those other variance criteria. And I think also inherently that would result in the lot area per dwelling also becoming closer to conforming. So I guess it's not clear to me why this design is being pushed for.
Yeah, I will let Richard speak to some of that, or Mark. I can tell you, though, based on my understanding, or at least the calculus of the lot, is that you separate into 3 different buildings, then you become non-compliant with max building block length, similar to what exists now. You end up with not enough spacing on the property to comply. So you end up, and there are other aspects, I believe, that start to take away from other aspects of the ordinance, but I can.
Okay. Yeah, I would just add, I understood the argument about this is a bigger lot and whatnot, but it seems to me that the reason for the max building footprint is that based on public comments through the master planning process and whatnot, that big boxy buildings is undesirable. So independent of the lot size, you could have more broken up buildings on a bigger lot or a smaller lot with fewer buildings. But the point is that if it's not a big, massive building, that's generally perceived as more desirable based on the master planning previous studies and whatnot.
So, just to state, the proposed buildings, when we were trying to develop these buildings, even though that they are a little bit larger, as you say, we are trying to also keep in mind like our max building block length, which is directly related to the zone itself, with building B being equal to that maximum at 80, and then building A at 44 feet, about half that. So we are trying to keep the building massing and the footprints aligned with the other intents of the zoning ordinance as well.
But isn't 80 the max, so breaking that 80-foot one up into two would be also fine?
Sure, but then once you start doing that, then the buildings start getting super tight to one another. You reduce that light and air that's between the buildings. We have to then also, when the buildings start getting too close to one another, the buildings will also have to have their window openings restricted between the buildings themselves. So the space in between the buildings, once you start doing that, becomes a little bit less of a desirable location.
Okay. Like I will say, I like that the smaller building is to the west, closer to the smaller residential buildings on that side. And then you have the space between these two buildings. But if you consider just the building to the east, right now, if it is one building, so there's zero space between what could be some space. So to say that you're limiting the light and air between buildings, if you broke it up, you would actually have some light or air in between them, because currently it's just one building.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, yeah, it's just, the intent is, like, by what you're saying is, yes, there would be more light and air between those buildings, but it's really just not desirable, because if you decide to go in there and build max and you only have like 5 feet between the buildings, how much light are you actually getting between those buildings?
Yeah, I guess it would be infinitely more than none, but I accept the comments.
Anything else, Vice Chair Mattson? Okay. Any other questions for the applicants from this side of the board? Anything, Mr. Nees? Okay. All right. With that, I'll open the hearing to the public. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? And is there anyone here who would like to speak against this application? Is there anyone here who would like to speak to, for, or against? Oh, online? Okay. Sir, why don't you come up first, and then we have one person online.
Okay. My name is Matthew Drennan, and I live at 329 Hanover Street. In regards to the flow between the buildings of light and air, there aren't any of these units that are landlocked, and so they all have light and air out. The current situation is the space between the buildings as it is now, we can drive a car through, but we are still listening to our neighbors. And so once you start to pinch that down, it's going to get really strange as far as just a residential situation. And so I don't see that there is a big deal with all the units having light and air. And to maximize that square footage so they can maximize the amount of units that are going in there. I've been in the neighborhood since 1995, and it has always been very comfortable, and Bruce and Jeff have always served the neighborhood very well. And that's about it. They get my thumbs up, even though I'm moving out.
Thank you. And there is somebody online? Bill Downey, could you please identify yourself?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Bill Downey from 67 Bow Street. And if there's one thing I've heard over the last 5 to 10 years, and it was reiterated recently in the master plan public input, is density. And as I understand it, it's going to go up about 33% from 12 to 16, if I recall. And that this is what happens. I don't need to lecture you, but you know, when a city grows, sometimes the existing variances are outdated. And these are pitches on the edge that sometimes might be on the corner, and you know, that's where a variance comes in, as you know. But I speak to a lot of people in the West End that tend to be younger, who've had a difficult time affording living in Portsmouth. And as Attorney Durbin said before, if you want to go to the strict letter of the law, as and by the way, Bob, it was good to hear your voice. I was surprised that you're on the board. I didn't know that. That you know, the strict letter of the law will not permit this, but you're also behind the curve on where the city is and what the citizens want. So I do believe Bruce is a good faith, I wouldn't say a developer, he's more of a businessman. And I know he's made a good faith attempt at working with the citizens. So I think in those regards, I'm all in favor of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone
You're
else
welcome.
here who would? Yes, you may raise.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. I'm Bruce Summer, the owner of the property. I have been a Portsmouth resident since 1998, moved back to Illinois to take care of my aging parents, plan to move back to Portsmouth once they've aged out. Lived on in every single building in that property since 2004 when I purchased it. Came here for grad school, bought it with a partner for some additional income during grad school. Been in the neighborhood, understand all the challenges of the development in Portsmouth since I've been here. Really appreciate the opportunity to see the neighborhood evolve and be, you know, at least remotely lately part of it, and now engage in it here. Had the pleasure of working with the neighbors, working with the folks who provided guidance on this design, and I want to thank the amazing team here. I'm not a developer, never been a part of that in my life. Had the opportunity to remodeled one of the properties, 349 Hanover, which I think is just west or southwest of it. Use those proceeds to pay off the debt and expand. However, there's nothing more than I want to do to make the right decision on the ethical and fair way to develop this property. It means a lot to me personally. I rely on this design team and Jeff Sabin, who will come up here in a second. We feel like we have, Mr. Raum, about the engaged porches, and that has been part of that character since I've been there. And that's one or two, when in speaking with the neighbors, speaking with other people, that's what they want. They want that feel, that same feel. Mr. Madison, about the error, we looked at taking those three buildings and just adding a third floor, and but also put the parking garage underneath. And as that pitches down, you'll see, just like in Foundry Place, that's the same reason that's kind of, I think, oddly designed because of that parking garage and the pitch. 3 makes that look, to me, out of character for the neighborhood. And I understand the two differences between the smaller one and the larger one, but I think if you look in the context of the entire side of that, plus that 51-unit taller building behind it, plus the 7-story unit behind it, that transition, in my opinion, is the right transition. As far as adding more density, I think the spirit of the density we've adjusted for, one, having those 14 extra parking spaces, adding additional spaces on that particular property, and then having all the design of the traffic flow on Hill Street, the private street. I think that takes care of, in my opinion, that the character and spirit of both the zoning ordinance and the neighborhood. So thanks for those questions. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here. And even the folks who speak in opposition, thank them. This is an amazing process that I'm privileged to be a part of. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to, for, against this application? Nothing else on it? Okay, with that, I'll close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, Attorney Durbin.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. It's just some letters were that were, I think, in support. I haven't read them, but they were rejected because they were late, but they're public comment. They're not from us. So we got copies to hand deliver tonight. Was what.
We will take them, our ability to obviously read them and take them
Understand
under consideration
completely.
is
It's just kind of
literally
a
nil.
disservice to the people that wrote them.
Okay, thank you. You may give them to Mr. Dees and he'll pass them down. Okay. All right. So, with that, I will close the public hearing and ask for the board's consideration. Oh, you want to take a break? Okay. All right. So, Mr. Rayum has used hand signals to say he wants to take a break, but we will take a 5-minute recess before we start our deliberations. Thank you. Zoning Board of Adjustment is back in session. So the public hearing has been closed and looking for the board's consideration. Mr. Neese?
May I ask a question of staff here first?
Of course.
I guess I'm a little confused on the zoning table where it says how many residences are allowed, and whether that's residences per lot or residence per building.
A building.
So if he put 3 buildings on here, he could have 24 residences, because it's up to 8.
Assuming they met the density requirement.
Right. But they don't meet the density, well, assuming they met the density requirement. Okay, because the table doesn't say whether it's per lot or per building. So is that an interpretation? It just says residences.
It is an interpretation that's consistent with past interpretation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now,
Mr. Mano?
I'm sorry, that explanation doesn't make sense, because right now we have 3 buildings, and there's 4 units per. But that's out of compliance with the ordinance that says those 3 buildings can only have 8 units. So it's not the buildings, it's the lot.
It's out of compliance with the density. With the density, not with the building, not with the units per building.
So the lot can only have 8 units.
No, not even that many.
No, the lot can have as many units fit into 3,000 square feet per dwelling unit.
Just
5. Okay. The buildings can have up to 8.
Correct.
Okay.
Vice Chair Mattson?
Yep. I have some comments. Yeah, I was trying to get to the bottom of some of the necessity of the variances. And I almost, you know, I didn't go after the lot area per dwelling unit because I think for one, there was an argument made that what's in the neighborhood is actually more consistent with this than what is required. And you know, like with this design, it is actually somewhat tastefully done. There is also, you know, I didn't quite buy this competing factors between the front lot line build out versus the maximum building footprint. But in general, I can get on the board with the fact that with all these criteria, particularly in the character districts, you can end up with a complex interaction of almost competing things to achieve. So I do understand a little bit of a concern there. Yeah, I guess it's a hard justification to say there's a hardship for why the building footprint needs to be bigger than what's allowed. I did, towards the end, I did hear something about the underground parking can also affect how the above ground would look with grade changes, but and I guess I also I can understand this concept of, you know, if you just broke up a building with this little space in between, if it was so minimal that it was essentially just like a meaningless gesture that didn't actually provide a benefit, that's not necessarily what the ordinance is looking for. I guess just overall, even though the design is relatively tastefully done, and again, this is kind of a transition between I mean, it is also a different zone behind, but the Foundry apartments behind it is obviously a taller structure, and this transitions. It just, I guess I'm just struggling with the amount being asked for, and whether or not the hardship is justified for the building footprints.
Anything from this end of the board? Mr. Ram?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so some thoughts. You know, one thing that we do have with our character-based zoning that we put in place is that the intent is, hey, we're you know, normally our zoning is kind of that peanut butter spread of a bunch of requirements that really sort of overlap. Lots of, especially in Portsmouth, lots of different actual characteristics on the ground. That's why a lot of stuff comes to this board to try and sort of parse through what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. We kind of put character-based zoning in place to try and minimize a lot of that by sort of being very specific about the nature of what we're expecting out of the properties. In my estimation, that's something that's kind of says, hey, if you're going to start having variances from that, you're probably facing a somewhat higher bar, just in the sense of we're being very prescriptive about how we're viewing what new development needs to look like in these areas. And the script is well defined. It's better thought out. Probably shouldn't be deviating from it too much. That said, I think this applicant here does have some very significant issues that are modulating some of that. So again, our CD4L, L1, L2 districts. This is L1. They're pretty similar. There's overlap there. Basically, the idea is 3,000 square foot minimum size lot, 3,000 square feet lot area per dwelling unit. So again, that's saying I'm going to have a tiny lot. I'm going to have probably a single family home on it, which I do think is somewhat representative of many of the other properties in this little neighborhood. There's some variation, but a lot of them are pretty small, older homes that either are single family or maybe duplex. There's a couple of exceptions to that with a slightly larger apartment building and then a rooming house that is a somewhat larger structure as well. And we ran into this with the applicant across the street from this property who came before this board looking to get a duplex. The board felt strongly about it, denied it, and said, nope, you are a single family. They ultimately were able to add on an ADU in their ultimate plan that went forward. But, again, we're saying, hey, we've thought through this pretty well. Your lot wasn't very far afield from what the requirements were for the CD4L1. In this case here, the applicant is 5 times larger than this, mental model that the CD4L1 has the property that they're looking at. It is the existing location of 3 multifamily units that are there. I don't think the intent of putting this in CD4L1 was to necessarily try and drive small single-family homes, especially for this lot. I think it was viewed as somewhat characteristic of the neighborhood. I think in this particular case, there is something to be said that, yeah, pulling something back that's a residential multifamily use does make a lot of sense. I kind of have the opposite viewpoint from the vice chair, where I do think that the 2 buildings makes a lot more sense. The 3 buildings now, I can tell you when I walk past it on my way into town and stumble on the way back home, that the narrow space between those buildings, in addition to being a fire hazard for fire jumping from one building to the other, is only really usable for some parking, and even by the time that the snow really starts getting pretty bad, even that becomes somewhat problematic. So I do think that concentrating into 2 buildings probably makes a fair amount of sense. Again, one of the characteristics that I think is pretty important is having this open space and making it connected in some way to the community. And I think we heard from the applicant and the applicant representatives that they were thinking in terms of that. I'm not entirely sure if they've been entirely successful at this point in time. So to me, the things that I'm struggling with is really just sort of the buildup of, okay, here's a variance, oh, here's another variance, here's another variance, here's another variance. At some point, the weight of all those variances really starts to also kind of, start tipping the balance against, you're asking for a lot of relief. And I think three of them are kind of related to each other. And I'm pretty comfortable with building A, the smaller of the two buildings that has its 6 units in it. It really comes down to that next building over. And so there's three things that are, or two major things that are tied up is the 8 dwelling units are maximized, and that's by a different part of the table. It's really not mentioned in the CD4L1, but it kind of goes back to the table 10440. There is a column for CD4L1, and 8 is kind of the maximum per structure. And then the overall square footage of that particular building is quite a bit larger than 2,500 square feet. And again, I think 2,500 square feet does not make sense for this property, but is 5,232 too high. And if we were to reduce the total number of dwelling units in that second building, reduce its square footage, then that would increase some of the opportunity to, hopefully, especially between the two properties or maybe towards the front of the property, create some more open space that would, again, enhance engagement for the buildings to the neighborhood, to each other, and add to that sense of community, which I do think that the current setup does have a sense of community to it. And I think that right now, what I'm seeing out of the proposal is that a lot of that goes away. So I think there could be an opportunity there to reduce down some of the variance that's being asked for. You know, it would be still probably, it's 12 units now, 1,344 square feet, could possibly go up to 14 units, would be, you know, somewhat higher than that, but maybe not quite as much as what they're asking for. It could eliminate some of all of those variances that they're asking for. So that's kind of where my mindset is right now. I think there's a lot of positives to the project. I just am not entirely sure that there isn't some opportunity to make things even better.
Any other thoughts or from the board members? Mr. Sullivan, anything? Mr. Nees?
Yeah, I think what concerns me a little bit is we're basically got a blank slate. We're assuming we're going to tear down those 3 existing buildings. And there's some opportunities there to increase open space, I think, which are being done to some extent. But I'm also concerned about the increased, I guess that's the wrong word, the reduction in the lot area per dwelling unit because of the increased density. And that's primarily, to me, seems to be driven by the 10 units in the second building. And, you know, that in essence, to me, it doesn't really comply with the spirit of the ordinance with respect to how the ordinance wants CD4L1 to work. We're waiving a lot of the elements that are in CD4L1, and I could see some variances from it, but I think the magnitude of these, I'm concerned about. I'm still wrestling with how they interact with each other and where I come down on it.
Okay, any other comments? Nothing? Okay, so I will speak as the chair. I am not going to be supporting this application because it is a blank slate. CD4L1 is something that was brought into our zoning ordinance fairly recently, well aware of the conditions in this particular part of the city. And the reality is that this property, vacant property, can be redeveloped in accordance with the zoning ordinance by admission by the applicant's own attorney. That is strict. They can build something in conformance with the zoning ordinance. Therefore, to me, they do not have hardship. So I will not be supporting it. But I don't know exactly where we're going to fall on this one, but perhaps we could try a motion. Mr. Manno?
I'll weigh in. I agree with Ms. Orium's statements that a lot of it is driven by Building B, the 10-unit building, where that if that was, say, 8 units, so we're giving them 2 more units than are currently there, which is whatever, and that complies with zoning, that eliminates that variance. That makes the community space between the buildings that much bigger, possibly eliminate that variance. You're still going to have the variances for dwelling unit per lot size because that number is fixed at 8. And there is no way around that. So anything more than 8 dwelling units on this property is gonna kick off 5. Is it 25 per unit?
No, it's 3,000 square feet, it's a 16,000 square foot lot.
Oh,
so
5.
5 times
Okay.
3 is
Sorry.
15,000.
I'm just going by 1,000 by 16 now, so, it is a blank slate, so whatever's built there can totally comply with zoning without any variances. That's number one. I agree with Ms. Marginson. But at the same time, it's redevelopment downtown in a heavily, built-out section of town, the beginning of the West End. So I'm willing to have some leeway with the variances as far as that, but not go from 8 units, 5 to 16. I think that's too big of a leap for me. But, I mean, we're talking about, like you said, a recently modified zoning area. So.
Okay, so with those comments, just something to keep in mind for the board, we are talking about the application that's in front of us, whether the applicant may revise it at some certain point, there's no consensus about that on the board. We need to keep our comments focused on what the application is, so Mr. Neese?
Yeah, the only other comment I add is with respect to Building B, my original comments focused on the number of units in there, but the reality is that this is over twice the size of the maximum building footprint, and I am disturbed by that as well.
Okay.
I guess my point is, if they made Building B 1 unit, I'd still be troubled.
Okay, but that's not what's in front of us tonight.
No, I know.
So I think, okay.
I know.
Thank
But
you,
I wanted
Mr.
to be
Pease.
clear about what my concern was.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll be looking for a motion now. I think everybody's had a chance to speak. Mr. Ram?
Yeah, so I'll try this motion on for size. I know that we kind of go back and forth a little bit about denial and then concerns with, putting an applicant in Fisher v. Dover territory. So here's what I'm proposing as a motion, and we'll see where this goes. Maybe it will get shot down. I propose that we postpone a final determination on this application until the Zoning Board of Adjustments July meeting, so pushing it out 2 months, with the direction to the applicant that the application be revised such that the variance D is eliminated, 1D, excuse me. Variance 2 is eliminated, and variance 1B is changed such that, I will leave it up to the applicant, such that it is a smaller number than what is being presented right now. So that is the motion that I would put forward.
Is there any second for that motion?
I would second that motion.
Okay, so discussion on the motion, please?
Yeah, so so here's my thought, just to reiterate, just to make sure everyone's clear. So variance 1B is a building footprint of 5,232 square feet, where 2,500 square feet is the maximum. So that applies to building B in the applicant's current design. I'm saying come back with a smaller number than that. I'm accepting the 3,035 square feet, or I'm saying that if it was unchanged, I would say that would be something for the board to consider. 1D is the 18% open space where 25% is required. The idea is that is eliminated. You are doing something to go and fully meet the 25%. Whether you include a cushion in that or not, that's the applicant's choice. And then 2 is the variance from section 10.440 to allow 10 dwelling units in a building where up to 8 dwelling units are permitted. That variance also has to be eliminated. That is to say that no building would have more than 8 dwelling units in it.
Is there any discussion on the motion, or do you have anything for your second, Mr.
I would
Sullivan?
add a little bit. My reason for second motion is that there's a lot of good about this application. All the commentary about it has included that. And yet, I would vote against the application for the reason that the chair stated. And in the final analysis, I hate to throw out the good with the bad. And I think that the motion that has been made by Mr. Riom gives us a chance to avoid doing that.
Okay, is there any discussions on the motion?
And just to clarify, is this is a continuance, or?
Yeah, I guess.
I think I'm gonna take a little bit of chair's prerogative here. We should only be continuing or postponing applications for more information, not to give the applicant the benefit of our thoughts on the application and a opportunity to revise them. That is absolutely not within the purview of our rules.
I disagree, Madam Chair.
That's fine. I mean, it's going to be up to the board, but it says here, the board may postpone any application requiring more information prior to any action being taken. We are asking for a revision of the application that is with us, in front of us tonight. I think we have to vote it up or down, allow the applicant to take whatever decision, whatever actions that we take, and take whatever steps they want. So, but Vice Chair Mattson?
Yeah, so I guess my question was about continuance versus postponement and the definitions of that. But then also in comment to, I do appreciate the point of the interpretation that it's just meant for more information. I would also say that a revision is more information, although I appreciate that that may not be the intent. But my actual question was more about continuance versus postponement.
I don't believe this is either.
Okay.
My opinion is that this is giving the applicant an opportunity to revise the application. I think it needs to be voted up or down. So, Mr. Mantle?
Yeah, I agree with the spirit of this postponement and what Attorney Sullivan said, not throwing out the good with the bad. But at the same time, that is turning us into what we just had, a work session. And we're no longer a legal board. Because we are offering our opinion, they're changing it, and the application in front of it is not the same application we would see in July. I get the intent to eliminate the variances, so on and so forth, and they can do that. If this is not approved, they can go back, make changes, and they'll have absolutely no problem getting back to the board because it would be different, substantially different. So, Fisher v. Dover would not apply. So, at the same time, with respect to not turning the ZBA into the HDC or the planning board, yeah, I'll agree with the chair. Will not be voting for a postponement.
Okay. Any other thoughts or considerations? I see Mr. Nees has his statute book out.
Yeah, it's not doing me any good.
Okay. All right, so the motion on the floor is to postpone or continue this application until the July 2026 meeting in order to allow the applicant to revise the variance request for 1D, 1B, and 2. Is that correct?
Yes, eliminate 1D, 2, and revise 1B.
Okay, so, Mr. Nees, unless there's something that you want to add, I'm ready to call the roll on that.
Nothing to add.
Okay, all right. So, I'll start with Mr. Nees.
No.
Mr. Mantle.
No.
Vice Chair Mattson.
Yes.
Mr. Rayam.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
Chair votes no. It's a 3-3. When we have a 3-3 tie, usually that is for an application.
Motion fails.
The
Motion fails.
Fails.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Motion fails. I just want to check one thing, though. Okay. Okay, so the motion fails. Just want to check something. All right, so now I will ask for a new motion. No one?
Well,
Mr. Neese, are you ready to make a motion?
no, I'm not. I've got a question about something we did in the past. I'm not sure if it's applicable here or not, and that is the motion to deny without prejudice. But I'm not sure that this situation actually fits, so I'm looking to those with more experience.
That's the Fisher versus Dover problem.
Right, but there's
That alleviates that, or?
there's a provision in the statute where you can, I'm not sure we can use it here. It says if you determine you lack sufficient information to make a final decision and the applicant does not consent to an extension, you may deny the application without prejudice. I'm not sure this situation really fits that, but that's why I'm asking the question.
Do you want to say
I
something?
think you would have to determine that you lack sufficient evidence
Okay,
first.
got it.
And I think this is a situation where we have enough evidence, it's just what we want to do with it.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Variances separately.
that is a possibility. I'm generally never in favor of that, but Jillian did say that we can take the variance separately. I generally am not in favor of that because I think it's better to take it as a whole package, but I would put that out for the board's consideration. Mr. Mannel?
I'll make a motion to deny the application as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
Could I ask, would the reason for denial be stated now or only after the second?
Well, we have
Like, what are the
usually done it
criteria?
after the second.
Okay.
So.
Thought our goal was to have it, the
State it now.
so
and then-
the second
it
note they
is-
were seconding.
Okay, we have done our motions to approval this year. This meeting the opposite way. We've actually had the second weigh in on whether or not. But, I mean, I think that perhaps you can state your motion for denial and see if you get a second.
My motion denial would be based upon the failure to meet the hardship criteria because it's a clean slate and shouldn't need any variances.
Okay. Can you state specifically, using our criterion for hardship, exactly how it fails?
I do not believe that this application, because it's a brand-new build on a vacant lot, will be, meets 10.233.25 of our 5 criteria, which deals with hardship. There's no reason why any application for this property can't meet all the zoning.
Okay. Is there anything from the second? Is anybody willing to second the motion to deny? Okay.
Okay, no second. Withdraw the motion.
Okay, I'll await another motion. I'm running out of space on my little sheet here. Mr. Neese?
I'll give it a try. It may take me a little while to get the wording just right, so bear with me here. I make a motion to deny the application on the basis that it several elements do not meet the spirit of the ordinance. The CD4L1 was designed to do a step down from the downtown area into residential areas, and it established some very specific requirements on lot area per dwelling unit, in addition, size of buildings, in addition, the number of units per building. This particular application conflicts with those without really explaining why that's necessary. In particular, the size of building B is over twice the size of the maximum building footprint. It's asking for 10 residences in the building where 8 are what's called for. And the lot area per dwelling unit is decreasing from what exists now.
Okay,
That's
and
my
is the criteria that you are finding that it should be denied is
It's
10.2
not-
through 3.21?
Whichever the one is that didn't.
The
it's not
spirit
meeting
and
the
intent?
spirit. Yes, it's not meeting the spirit of the ordinance, 10.233.22.
Okay, and is there any way in which you think that it fails?
I just explained it.
Excuse me?
I just explained it.
No, is there any one of the other criterion you think that it fails?
The other criteria.
Yes. I have to go on the back.
No.
Just kidding.
I'm leaving it at that for my motion.
Second.
Okay. And the second is Mr. Mantle. Okay. The motion on the floor is to deny based on the reasons stated by Mr. Neese, that it does not meet the spirit of the ordinance for the reasons that he stated. So I will start with, who did I start with last time? I will start with Mr. Neese.
Yes.
Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mattson.
Yes.
Mr. Rayam.
No.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The motion to deny is approved 5-1. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Great. Thank you very much, board, for that very thoughtful deliberation. I appreciate it. I'm sure they don't, but, okay, so with that, that was our last application of the night. I'll await a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
Okay, everyone in favor?
Aye.
Great.